Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. Let's do it. Let's get to it. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. It is Friday, September 5th, 7 a.m. Eastern. And this is the week one matchup show. Welcome back, y'all. I know it's been a minute, but redraft comes around, and I have to get on here and just talk to you guys and give y'all that game about which players should or shouldn't be in your matchup. That's what this show is typically about. If you are new to this, we basically look at players that are outside certain thresholds in the Fantasy Pros expert consensus rankings. We're looking at quarterbacks and tight ends outside the top 10, running backs and wide receivers outside that top 20. And we're going to give you guys that are either outside of that top 20 or outside of those top 10s for those onesie positions that deserve a shot in your lineup this week. And in other weeks, we will look at guys that are inside those thresholds that probably don't deserve to be in your starting lineups for one reason or another, whether it's a matchup, whether it's their role, whether it's a decline in production, whatever the situation may be. So we're looking for those, those under the radar guys in some cases, or we're looking for guys that, maybe getting a little too hyped by the community here. So this week, it's the first week of the season. Week one always gets a little bit weird. Week one does, when you have you're just dealing honestly with information. You don't have any significant data to back up what you're trying to say. All that data is based off of things that happened last year. So week one is a little bit weird. Actually, if you guys were listening at all last year, I don't like, calling out guys that are inside certain thresholds that shouldn't be in the first few weeks of the season, because again, we don't have enough information. So a lot of the guys here, they're going to be on the guys that you should play side here. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So again, welcome to Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast and YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you hit that subscribe or that follow button there as well, so you can make sure that you get this content every week. Make sure you're following on the socials. I'm Jon Jeune at the real Jon J _FF. If you want to follow the Fantasy Football Diagnostics show, that's at FF Diagnostics, and that's on both X and Instagram. So, week one fantasy football matchup show, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. We've got a game against the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers that takes place in Brazil. So for the first player of the day that we'll talk about, we're going to talk about Kansas City running back Isaiah Pacheco. He's the ECR PPR running back 23. This one's pretty easy for me, most likely to be the lead back again this year. There's no Rashee Rice in the first 6 games of the season, so I think the Chiefs probably will have to lean on a healthy Pacheco a bit more than they did last year. Plus, the matchup is good here against the Chargers, who struggled against opposing running backs at the end of last year, allowing the 12th most PPR points to opposing running backs during the last 3 games of the regular season last year. So Isaiah Pacheco, I know he's been a little down for some of us, but I think in this matchup here on Friday, we can put him in our lineups as a reliable high-end RB2 here. Moving on to the next matchup against the New York Giants and the Washington Commanders. let's talk about Washington, newly added Washington wide receiver Debo Samuel. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 38. And look, there's all this talk about who's gonna lead the Washington Commanders as a ball carrier, right? Whether it's going to be uh, Bill Krosky Merritt, or as you'll see him in your fantasy app, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, but he goes by Bill, or Chris Rodriguez or Austin Eckler. Um, so with all this talk about who's the lead ball carrier in Washington, I feel like we should talk about the guy who will operate as their number two receiver and probably could be in the top three in rushing for them as well. So, with that being said, I don't see how Debo Samuel in this uh, game against the New York Giants here uh, falls outside the top 36 of wide receivers. He's outside the wide receiver three range. If you're talking about the top 12 wide receivers, or the if you're talking about a 12-team league essentially, right? So especially with that Giants pass rush, Debo Samuel, those dump offs are perfect, and Terry McLaurin spent a lot of time, not practicing. So Debo Samuel has that. He's pretty much worked himself into football shape and has that connection with Jaden Daniels. Not that Terry McLaurin doesn't, but I think it's just another feather in the cap there for Debo Samuel. Moving on to the next matchup, we've got the Carolina Panthers taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. And let's go with Jacksonville running back Travis Etienne, the ECR PPR running back 29. Must admit, I was not in on the Jacksonville backfield at all in redraft, but it seems that Travis Etienne is the most likely to have a significant role, at least to start the season. So, that being said, I am willing to take the production here at the running back position. Running back, a low end running back two is about where I have him. Running back two, borderline running back three is about where I have him. This is me just, giving that confidence boost here. If you do have Travis Etienne and you're really struggling, do I put him in my lineup? I think that's definitely something that you should consider this week. Moving on to the next matchup between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New York Jets, let's look at New York Jets quarterback, Justin Fields. He's the ECR PPR quarterback 14. Now, guys, last year I talked about Justin Fields almost every week while he started for Pittsburgh. Now in a revenge game, I feel like it's only necessary. We obviously know how dangerous he can be with his legs, and that's part of the appeal with Justin Fields. It's not, we saw if you follow social media, or you fall for the clickbait, there's a lot of, oh, Justin Fields is still struggling to pass. And you know what? That may be true. Very well may be true. I still think that they haven't, shown the entirety of the offense. And at the end of the day, Justin Fields, whether he's struggling to pass the football or not, he's always going to rely on his legs. I mean, that's what's made him, um, you know, that's how he's had any semblance of success in the league. So Justin Fields is going to continue to use those legs, and the opportunity for rushing touchdowns is always there for him as well. So quarterback 14, he could easily fall into that with his rushing upside. And we're gonna get two from this game because I like this little double up right here, a little in-game stack, if you will. But let's talk about New York Jets tight end Mason Taylor. He's the ECR PPR tight end 27. Now, rookie tight end first game probably seems a little, a little courageous here, but Mason Taylor, he's been operating pretty much as the number one tight end in camp for the New York Jets and for Justin Fields. And him and Fields have had a pretty good connection throughout mini camp, OTAs, training camp. And outside of Garrett Wilson, there's really not much behind him, in this passing game. So obviously, Breece Hall, he's going to operate as a receiver. They have Josh Reynolds, they have Alan Lazard, but really not a whole lot of names that excite you. Mason Taylor, he will be on the field in a full-time role. So the possibility that he ends up having, a tight end one, tight end, borderline tight end 1.5 type day, I don't think is that far out of the realm of possibility. Also, as we often say with the tight end position, it ends up being who's the guy that caught the touchdown. That's the guy that usually will find his way in the top 12. So if Mason Taylor can do that, I think he'll be off to a good week. Moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders against the New England Patriots. Let's talk about Las Vegas quarterback Geno Smith. Geno seems primed for a big-time year in a Chip Kelly offense, and I think that starts this weekend. We obviously know, Chip Kelly has had success with quarterbacks, and not even just his college days, but if you look at what he was able to do with uh, Nick Foles, and even Sam Bradford had a good year. What he was able to do with, actually, did Sam Bradford ever even play a game under Chip Kelly? I'm trying to remember that right now. Either way, besides the point. Yeah, no, Sam Bradford did play for Chip Kelly. Anyway, also Colin Kaepernick had a really good year under Chip Kelly as well. So I think Geno Smith meshes with Chip Kelly just perfectly here in the style of offense Chip Kelly likes to play and the way that Geno loves to attack down the field. And speaking of attacking down the field, let's talk about Las Vegas wide receiver Dante Thornton. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 89. He is going to line up as the X receiver here for the Las Vegas Raiders and Geno Smith. He's operating as a starting wide receiver in an offense that has Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers, and he will be the deep threat here, the big vertical threat here for the Raiders. And I think that complements Geno a lot. Geno loves to get the ball down the field. So Dante Thornton, 6'5", 4.3, 40-yard dash. He will be part of how these Raiders get the ball down the field and not going to cost you anything. I don't even honestly, if you don't even need to you don't even need to start him this week, but I feel like I just had to get him on this list. So he's a guy that you can add off of waivers or add to the end of your bench if you've got a free roster spot and just keep an eye on his performance. And if he doesn't do anything, you can always just drop him. But I think he's a guy we'll be talking about next week. Next week when I say next week, the waiver show, but possibly the matchup show too. Let's see. Moving on in the next game, we've got the Arizona Cardinals against the New Orleans Saints. And let's talk about New Orleans Saints wide receiver Chris Olave. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 32. Olave seems to have been discounted in drafts due to his injury history and the quarterback situation. But that was his draft price. It seems to kind of be embedded in his, in his weekly ranking this week as well. Olave, he's healthy right now, right? So, if that's your concern, it's not a concern going into week one. The quarterback situation, I actually like Spencer Rattler probably more than I should. But I also think Kellen Moore finds a way to utilize Olave and get him the ball, not just in space, but also down the field as well. So I like Olave here in this matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, where the Saints are 6.5-point dogs. Will probably be having to throw the ball a lot. They're playing at home in their dome. So I think this is a conducive situation here for Chris Olave to score some quality fantasy points and give you a wide receiver 2 type day. Moving on to the next matchup here, we've got the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Cleveland Browns. Now, Cleveland wide receiver Jerry Jeudy, he is the ECR PPR wide receiver 25. And if you remember anything about this show last year, it was me pushing Jerry Jeudy for like 8 weeks and then finally giving up and then him blowing up at the end of the year. So Jeudy, he crushed it last year, especially that coincided with Jameis came in at quarterback for the Browns. And now we have Joe Flacco starting for the Browns. And say what you want about Joe Flacco, but he is going to lead a respectable pass offense for this Cleveland Browns offense here, and a matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals where we're hoping that we get a little back and forth nature to it, which that we'll talk about later, maybe in the starts of the week. I don't know. Guess you'll have to stick around and find out. But let's move on to the next matchup here. We've got the Miami Dolphins taking on the Indianapolis Colts. And let's talk about Indianapolis tight end Tyler Warren. He's the ECR PPR tight end 11. Um, at this point, we got to take our shot on rookies in a solid matchup, right? Tyler Warren, first round pick, second tight end off the board, which was a surprise to most people in the NFL draft. But again, he's going to most likely be the lead tight end option here for the Indianapolis Colts, and the Miami Dolphins gave up some production to the tight end position last year. And so I think this is a good opportunity here for Tyler Warren to show his stuff. Moving on to this next matchup here. And, I guess I get rookie fever sometimes. I don't know. But let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Atlanta Falcons. And let's talk about a rookie that I absolutely love in Tampa Bay wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, who is the ECR PPR wide receiver 28. Uh, Look, on paper, matchup doesn't look great. But like I said, I absolutely love this rookie. Baker Mayfield gushed about this rookie. And without Chris Godwin and Jalen McMillan, Egbuka should be locked in here to a substantial role. And Mike Evans, obviously, we know who he is, and the attention that he commands, especially from an Atlanta Falcons defense that has AJ Terrell there, who operates as a lockdown corner and probably going to give Mike Evans a little bit of trouble. Not enough that I would consider benching him, but I think this frees up Egbuka to make some plays in the intermediate levels of the field here, kind of filling in not the full Chris Godwin role, but filling in some of those opportunities and those targets that Chris Godwin would typically take. Staying on the Tampa Bay pass offense, let's talk about Cade Otton, the tight end, the ECR PPR tight end 22. He had some great games against Atlanta last year. I'm pretty sure I know he went for 100 yards in one of the Atlanta games. I'm pretty sure that he might have gone for 100 yards in both the Atlanta games. But anyway, his production really took off when Chris Godwin got injured last year. And with Chris Godwin out of the lineup, I think Cade Otton is in line to fill that role again. And he had, I think it was actually the first game after the Godwin injury, he had 9 catches on 10 targets for 81 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I think he's being slept on. I don't really understand why, but neither here nor there. I think if you need tight end help, Cade Otton can definitely help you there. Let's move on to the next matchup. We've got the Tennessee Titans against the Denver Broncos. And let's talk about Denver Broncos running back, J.K. Dobbins. He's the ECR PPR running back 30. Now, he's the possible lead back here for Sean Payton against a Tennessee defense that struggled against opposing running backs last year. I know there's a lot of talk about R.J. Harvey and what his role could potentially be, but I think J.K. Dobbins is going to have this lead role at least to start the season. So if you're looking for running backs to help you right now, maybe you went with some higher upside guys that maybe don't have defined roles yet. If you're looking for some guaranteed 8 to 10 points here, I think J.K. Dobbins can help you do that. Now let's move on to the next matchup here between the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. And let's talk about a guy I don't really want to talk about, but we're going to have to talk about him because we got some news late last night. But San Francisco running back Brian Robinson, he's the ECR PPR running back 52. Now, why am I talking about him? Why did I not want to talk about him? I'm talking about him because late last night we received a report that Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers has ended up on the injury report with what is being called a calf injury. And if you played fantasy football last year, you were paying any attention to football last year, this is the same uh, type of injury. I don't want to call it the same exact injury because I don't have all the specifics as to which calf it is or whatever. But CMC, he missed a big chunk of time last year with a calf injury. And so, somebody asked me what my thoughts were, if I thought this was bad. And I'm not a medical professional, right? I don't know. Um, I don't have all the specifics of CMC's injury, but what I can say is if he was if he was supposedly healthy all summer and he ends up on the injury report 3 days before they're supposed to play their first game of the season with an injury that similar to the one that kept him out a large chunk of the year last year, I don't think that's good news. I don't think that's good. So if you have Brian Robinson, um, or if you have this, if you're the CMC manager, you should probably start making some arrangements. Sorry, that's if you're the CMC manager, you should probably start making arrangements. Maybe you have Brian Robinson. Maybe you are not the CMC manager, and you also have Brian Robinson. I would be paying attention to what's going on with Brian Robinson or with CMC because Brian Robinson deserves a spot in your starting lineup if CMC does have to miss any time in this game here, especially. So. He'll be in for a big role, Brian Robinson would be, and he could even play if CMC he could even play have a role if CMC does play as he could be limited. So keep an eye on that as well. Moving on in the next game here, we've got the Detroit Lions against the Green Bay Packers, and let's talk about another rookie wide receiver, one of my favorite players coming into this draft here. Green Bay wide receiver Matthew Golden. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 41. One of my favorite players coming in the draft. He has crushed it so far. Has been operating as the Packers' #1 receiver. I'm excited to watch the rookie in year one, starting with this game right here. Let's move on to the next matchup here. We've got the Houston Texans going up against the Los Angeles Rams, and let's talk about Houston tight end Dalton Schultz. He's the ECR PPR tight end 25. Good matchup here against a Rams defense that gave up production to opposing tight ends last season. I felt like I talked about Dalton Schultz a lot last year, but that was also part of the fact that there was not many weapons. We've got some rookie weapons there in Houston, but I think CJ Stroud leans on his veteran tight end in this one here. Next up, let's talk about Sunday Night Football as we have the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Buffalo Bills. And let's talk about Baltimore wide receiver Zay Flowers. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 27. Lamar is #1 wide receiver in a game with a 44.5 point total that I think should be high scoring here. I like the sound of that. I like that Buffalo gave up production to opposing wide receivers last year as well. Zay Flowers, he had an up and down year last year, but I think there was a point in the season where he had suffered a high ankle sprain, and it looked like he was playing through it. So, but I think that hindered his production, and I think that somewhat has soured. Folks, perspective on the wide receiver. Last year they played early in the year and didn't do much, had 2 targets, 1 reception, 10 yards. But I feel like I think they find a way to get him going in this one in what should be a high scoring game here. And last but not least, the last game of the slate, let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings against the Chicago Bears. And let's talk about Minnesota running back Jordan Mason. He's the ECR PPR running back 37. Look, Aaron Jones, he's still great. for sure. But I think there's something to the fact that the Minnesota Vikings went out and traded draft capital to get Jordan Mason on their team and then sign him to an extension. Um, so Mason will at least, in my opinion, be in a 50-50 split with Aaron Jones. He played well as a lead back for San Francisco last year, and he should continue to play well for the Minnesota Vikings in this very good running scheme here by Kevin O'Connell. And as long as those opportunities come, I think he'll continue to be productive here. So Jordan Mason, he's going to, he projects as more of the, the ball carrier here, the lead back in a committee, where Aaron Jones kind of profiles as like a change of pace back at this point of his career. So, Jordan Mason might steal more opportunities than I think some are willing to admit. Wow, that was quick. Obviously week one, so there's not a whole lot of data to go off of. So yeah, I had a feeling it would be a quick one, but we're not done yet. You know how this goes. It's time for the week one starts of the week. We'll do this every single week where I will give you guys one player at each of the four major positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, that I think deserves a spot in your lineup. This week, I feel like we have some of the bigger names here, where it becomes kind of like a, call your shot for the top performer of the week at the position. But as we get later in the year, it'll be more about guys that deserve spots in your lineups. Guys that we might have picked up off the waiver wire. Should we start them? Um, you know, a guy who's trending in the right direction. So as those things start to come, you'll see the starts of the week evolve. But this week, I'll admit it's a little bit chalkier. But again, I think we're calling our shot this week more than anything. And so, starting at the quarterback position, let's talk about Cincinnati quarterback Joe Burrow going up against Cleveland. Now, I have to admit, I wasn't. I'm never going to draft a Joe Burrow unless I have like, uh, you know, Jamar Chase or T. Higgins on my fantasy team already, just because I love the rushing upside that quarterbacks bring. And Joe Burrow brings a little bit of that, very little of that. But anyway, I digress. I think this matchup here is fantastic against the Cleveland Browns. So I'm riding with Joe Burrow here in what could be a sneaky high scoring game with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on the outside. If Cleveland can keep pace, we could be looking at a shootout here, which bodes well for Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati offense. Moving on to the running back position, give me Tampa Bay running back Bucky Irving going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Bucky burst onto the scene last year as Tampa Bay's workhorse, winning that job later on in the year, and he was efficient as a rookie. He is locked into volume and gets a favorable week one matchup here against the Atlanta Falcons. Moving on to the wide receiver position, let's talk about the rookie that we had mentioned before. That's Green Bay wide receiver Matthew Golden. I had to throw a rookie in here. Matthew Golden has big time upside. He's got speed to burn, and he's operating, as I said, as the number one receiver for the Green Bay Packers. And I love his chances to make an immediate impact out the gate against the division rival Detroit Lions. And last but not least, let's talk about Cleveland tight end David Njoku going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. If Cleveland is going to keep up in their game against the Bengals, they'll need David Njoku. He already showed chemistry with Joe Flacco from their time playing together, 2 years ago when Flacco played for the Browns. And that connection could pay off again in this matchup against a Cincinnati defense that struggled to defend the tight end position last year. All right, y'all. That is all I have for today. Let's wrap this up. And again, make sure you're following me at the real Jon J _FF. Make sure you're following me at FF Diagnostics. I'll be putting out weekly content, whether it's starts of the week reel, which will go out today, or whether it's the Thursday night picks, where I give my picks on the game, the spread, player props. So make sure you're locked into that as well. But make sure you're back next Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern, as we break down the waiver wire show and talk about which guys you need to add to your fantasy football roster to keep your team rolling. Now, remember, week one is just 1 week of the fantasy football season. That's one out of, if you play in, depending on how your league is formatted, that's 1 out of 14 weeks in the fantasy football season. Don't overreact. Don't panic. If don't, and if your guys do really well, also don't overreact there as well, right? So, um, just stay level headed. Keep keep chopping wood. Keep working your lineup. Keep working the waiver wire. It's going to be a long year, full of ups and downs, but I promise you guys got this. Just stay locked in, and we'll make sure you get to exactly where you want to be, which is a fantasy football championship. So that being said, good luck this weekend, y'all. Enjoy the football. I'm so happy that it's back. So happy to be back here with you guys. And again, we'll see you on Tuesday for the waiver show. Have a good weekend, y'all. Peace.